Okay, welcome everybody to Jake's Take, episode 9. Today, as always, we have a very special guest, a real estate investor that I recently just met and was very excited to bring her onto the podcast. We had some great back and forth. She's very knowledgeable about investing, multifamily, and maybe others. We're going to find out. So this is a little bit of an interview for me as well. But I'd like to welcome the one and only Adriana Ostapenko.
Thanks, Jake. It's a pleasure to be here.
Not a problem. So first off, like I said in the intro there, we only just met, right? I know I've heard your name in the industry, but we met, I would say 2-3 weeks ago. And it was good. It was a really interesting meeting. Unfortunately, the deal we met on couldn't pan out, but I learned a little bit about you and I thought, hey, you know what, let's have you on the podcast. Let's kind of dive into what you're all about and your background. So if you don't mind, and you just want to let me know a little bit about who you are, my intro again was kind of light because we really don't know that much about each other. So I'm very interested. So please give us an intro here about who you are, what you do, and why you're here today.
Yeah, of course. And we also have a few friends in common that we've both known for a few years, and they just kind of came across each other recently. So that's good. I mean, we're in the same circles, same property people, which is amazing.
Well, that was the thing, right? It was like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait, you know him, you know her. And we clicked really, really well instantly like that. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So a little bit about me. We started investing, when I say we, I mean my husband and I, but started investing back in 2017. So we're about 5 years in. We come from a construction background. We run an interior renovations company outside of the GTA. And that's how we got into real estate. It just made sense. We also wanted to learn how to buy the homes and keep them, not just renovate them. So I sought out some education and went through an educational program to learn how to do this. And we immediately started doing BRRRRs because that's what made sense. We're in the construction industry. So we just jumped in and started doing BRRRRs. We did 5 BRRRRs, mostly in Hamilton, Ontario, over the next 3.5 years. And they changed our lives.
Yeah.
You really did.
No, and it's amazing. So that's right off the bat. That's something I didn't know about you, that you started from that construction side. And I'm always jealous when investors tell me that, because not that I regret going into real estate, but I'm always like, oh, you know what? It would have been a very handy skill to have if, even if I was like a plumber, electrician, framer, right? Had something like that in my background, or even construction management. So I'm always jealous when I hear that, and I hear it a lot, right? You guys have an upper hand. You have that X that the typical investor's not going to have. So that's amazing. And where did you guys start the construction company? And was it just for you, or did you do like spec builds? How did you get into that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my husband started back in college. He was just, finished his degree and went into owning his own business and started entitling, and then grew from there into full house rentals. And then when we started our BRRRRs, that was a lot of new skills that we picked up as well. Yeah. Now we haven't focused on doing BRRRRs for other investors. Our BRRRRs we were doing on our own, but he takes on client. The construction company is still ongoing right now, and we work with clients in the west end of Toronto.
I was just going to ask that. I was going to say, so have you kind of shut that end down? Is it just focused on you guys investing? But no, you are still doing some builds for clients. That's great. And what was and this is something that I always really like to dive into with everybody is what was the why for investing, right? You guys had this construction company, I'm sure you guys were very profitable. You're doing well in the industry. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, let's start buying and flipping homes.
Yeah, great question. So I had a double type of why. One is I have 2 kids. Yep. They were tiny. They still are, but 6 and 8 right now. And they're definitely my why. We come from a humble background, both of us. We're immigrants into the country. We both have single moms. and that we're just living day to day and week by week. So both my husband and I, that's our background. When we got married, we had nothing. We really came from humble beginnings. So as we kept building ourselves, I kept pushing myself. What else can I do here? Because I felt an immense responsibility to change our legacy for our family, not just for my kids, but now I have two aging, single moms that don't really have a way to retire. Just about the time where we started investing, my mom actually went through something really difficult and moved in with us. And all of a sudden I had my kids to raise and I had my mom there. And I felt like I need to do more than just enough for us. I need to grow something much bigger than that. And that was my interest. That was my light bulb moment. I have to do something differently. And real estate just clicked. I went and I sat and I talked to a few investors and I went through the program and I'm like, I can do this. This makes sense to me.
And was it, so you're a Keyspire member. I'm not, I hope I'm not outing you or anything here, but when did you join Keyspiring? Was that like the first step for you?
That was the very first.
Where did you learn about? Okay. Because that's a question I get a lot, being in the sales side of things, where people are like, hey, I want to invest. I've heard of this real estate investing or the BRRRR and things like that, but where do I actually get the knowledge, right? I've heard all these people, these motivational speakers, and they say, go do it, just go do it. And you're like, okay, great. But what's the first step? So I always like to ask all my guests, right? Doesn't matter where they come from, is hey, where did you learn that knowledge to do the first one? And for you, I guess that was through Keyspire. So that's awesome. I like that. If you don't mind me asking, when did you buy your first property, and what did that look like? If you don't mind walking through a bit of a case study, I'm always curious because I like to relate the markets, even from 2 years ago to now. It's very interesting.
So crazy deal for sure. I bought my first property in Hamilton, downtownish, back in the summer of 2018. That was June 18. We bought it for $340 with our friend in common, Zach. And it was a single family home, just very, very rundown property. Sellers were living in there with like another 8 people or something. But it was vacant when we took possession, and we applied to the city. I knew the zoning was right. And we converted it into a legal fourplex.
Again, you let me know if this is diving too much, but I really like to know about these things. What did the returns look like on that for you guys?
So I'll tell you what happened right after the BRRRR and then what happened now. So we put in quite a bit of money. It was really needed a lot of work. And within about 8 months, so we bought it for $340, we put in about $250. That's including carrying costs, all of it. Within 8 months, we appraised at $700. And then we went and took that money out and paid back. We had a partner in that first stage of the deal. We paid them out and we owned the property, cash flowing amazing at about $2,000 a month. We were hooked. Like, we're
$2,000 a month. Okay. Yeah.
Now, this is interesting. Fast forward last year, 2020, 2021. And we were approached by, it's a bit of a story, but we later on bought the property in that very next door to this one. There was another fourplex. So now we own side-by-side fourplexes. We had a builder approach us to purchase the properties from us because they wanted to build a condo in that area. And it wasn't originally for sale, but sometimes it makes sense to sell.
Hey, everything has a price.
Exactly.
Everything has a price.
So,
okay.
We sold it. We bought it for, again, $340 in 2018. Yep. We sold it 2021 for $1.25 million.
Love it. That's enough said. We can finish the podcast there. So. Yeah, seriously. No,
it's crazy.
It's amazing. And you know what, like I hear these stories all the time, and that's something that, I try to explain to investors, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, where, sometimes it's, if you can find the right neighborhoods, the right areas, understand the markets and the development that are coming, and whether you planned it that way or not, you can always say, hey, this street corner is going to be ripe for development in 10 years, 5 years. So maybe even if it's less than desirable, if the house pops up next door, maybe that's something we should look at picking up, even if it's a total, piece of crap. So that's a perfect example of that. I'd love to use that, moving forward. So that was your first property, and obviously you've had a career since then in real estate, and where are you now? So that was your first one. What do your investments look like now? Are you still doing those burrs and single families? Have you kind of graduated to the multifamily side of things? 5, 6, 7 doors, or even more?
Yeah, great question. So, about mid to fall of 2020, I decided that I wanted to scale. The birds did amazing for us, so it took us, 3.5 years to collect 20 doors doing our burrs. I'm like, how do I move faster than this? But do less was my thinking here. So as I always do, back to your point earlier, my first step is always education. I don't know how else to go around this. So my first step is always education. My first step in that education process is talking to other people. Like, hey, so my intention was, how do I find people that have been doing this for a long time, have a proven track record, and let me go find out what they do in real estate. And that was my approach. I'm so blessed to have such an amazing network of people in my life. I contacted, some more veteran real estate investors and found a common theme in multifamily, so apartment buildings. And then I dove into it. I'm like, okay, what about multifamilies is so great? How do you go through the process of acquiring them? And then I got educated on these things and decided I wanted to pursue apartment buildings. So we picked a market. We spent a couple months doing market analysis and research, and because it was outside of the markets I was currently investing in due to high price points. It was the main reason. I was looking for good returns, good cap rates, good cash flow. And then like in the last 5 months or 6 months of 2021, we acquired 37 doors in the apartment building space.
Amazing. And do you mind if I ask what market that was in?
So we're out in New Brunswick right now.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. And I was hoping you were going to mention that, because I know when we spoke, you did mention you own a couple things out there. And what did the market show you out there? What was kind of your driving factor to say, hey, you know what, let's for at least for this sector, let's leave Ontario and go look outside. Again, it's another question I think I get 3, 4, 5 times daily. And I'm sure if you ever spoke to newer investors, I'm sure they ask you as well. But you said you did a lot of market research. What did that look like, and why out east?
So, ultimately, there's a few things that I'm looking for when I'm breaking into a new market. I look at historical trends. That's one of my first moves. I look at historical trends. What has the real estate market done in this market over the last as many years as I can track it back to possible? So I look at that. I look at what is it doing now, which, it's not always a true measure. This is why I need to have that historical data in mind.
Yes.
Beyond that, I'm looking for population trends, industry, investments, development within those areas. Is there things going on? Are there jobs? Are people investing in this? Are they building condos or apartments or homes, right? Is there progress? How friendly is the city towards, improving and bringing people in?
Yes.
I'm looking at vacancy rates. I'm looking at, price per door, cap rates that are being traded in the markets. So I'm looking at all these different signs of, is this a good enough market to be investing in? Do I feel confident enough to invest in here for the long term?
Yeah. Yeah. And to the opposite, right? Or are the factories closing down, right? Is it kind of a one industry town? You look at a lot of Northern Ontario towns. Yeah. I love a 7-8% cap rate just as much as the next guy, but it's a one industry town, right? And what happens, and I'm not saying that's tomorrow or the next day, but what happens when that does go, if it goes, right? So I think there's strategies for that as well. But like you said, and that's why I was happy to hear that you said, long-term investing. because I don't want to knock the 7% cap rate if, you can build $500,000 of equity and sell it off in 2 years, right? But from what I'm hearing, you invest very similar to I do, which is like I've never sold anything I've bought. Maybe it's a bad thing. Maybe I'm becoming a hoarder, but everything I've owned, and I say this to my clients, I always go, hey, you make wealth in real estate by holding real estate. Obviously if a big pocketed developer wants to come by and, buy up your land, hey, take the opportunity. But
you went all right back into real estate.
yeah. Keep it in that cycle. And another good point I just want to mention is, you're not reinventing the wheel, right? Like you said, you see what other investors have done and you're implementing it in your own style or your own action plan. And I say that daily, right? And no matter how, special you think you are, no one's ever reinventing the wheel. So let's find what people do very well and take that and use it in our own method. And I really think that's a strong point, that the listeners can take home from that is find who's in your network and connect with them. Another question I get, and this is something I wanted to ask you about as well, is, and we don't have to dive too deep, but your capital raise structure on how you're buying these buildings. I know you mentioned the first one you had a business partner who came in with probably a bit of cash. So maybe this apartment building or another example, how are you currently raising your capital to do these investments?
Yes, so we do bring in financial partners to partner with us in the apartment buildings. The BRRRRs, we did all of our own, but we do have partners in the apartment building space, which what I love about it is the ability that it gives and the impact that it causes by bringing a couple of investors together to own this larger asset. And the possibility there. So we do normally, we use a corporate shareholder structure for our apartment buildings. And we bring in financial partners for the down payment and closing costs, and we're buying and hold together. And I do all the operations on our end.
Yeah. So you're basically coming in cash free, let's say, at a 10,000 foot level, which is very cool. And most of these investors, are you connecting just within your network, meetups, Facebook groups, Keyspire? Are these relationships you've built?
Yeah, so it's definitely, I like to build long-term relationships. So it's usually people that I know, trusted family and friends type of situation. Beyond that, we only work with accredited investors. So it comes through our network. Usually it's referrals, where people just see what I'm doing. They're interested. We'll have further conversations, get to know each other and see if it's a good fit to invest with us. We have a waiting list currently, which is incredible, of people that are interested in investing with us. So it's my job is to really find quality apartment buildings and projects out there. And then make sure, and then my other bigger responsibilities, make sure these buildings are performing, operating as they should once we've acquired them.
So you have an apartment building, you have your stuff, you're doing very well in the industry. But what's your goals? Why do you do this, or what do you define, being successful as moving forward, right? I know some people, their plan is, hey, I just want to, make enough money to go traveling and see the world. Others are, I'm going to still work 9 to 5. I just love doing it on the side, right? And anything in between there. But what's your drive?
Yeah, so my why has changed and evolved over time. Big reason was I was able to really fulfill my first why, which is amazing. Like, we've changed our family's, financial legacy for my kids, even for our moms. So I feel very grateful for that journey.
And I was hoping to hear that. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm always grateful and touched when I think through that. My next why, and it came as a byproduct that I didn't realize at first until I was in it. When we were doing our BRRRRs, we were borrowing, investor funds to pay for some rentals, and then refinancing and paying them back. And I kept talking to investors. I would make comments like, hey, I'm so happy because I finally get to go see my daughter 3 times this year. I normally can only see her once. Or hey, I get to go have a trip with my spouse, for their birthday, and I couldn't things like that, and how it was impacting investors' lives, by giving them this investment opportunity. And that really generated something within me, and just feel so blessed to be able to offer these opportunities. And another example is my sister. She's also doing very, very well. She has a 9 to 5. She's a corporate, director. She loves her job. She works crazy hours, makes really good money. And she's like, it's sitting in my bank account.
Yeah.
And she's like, can you just help me out here, do something? I can see that this is what you do. The ability to be able to generate these types of opportunities for investors that either don't have the time, the knowledge, or are not interested in doing themselves, as well as the ability to impact people's financial life through these returns in real estate, is what keeps me going. I love what I do. I do it every day. I wake up early, excited. I go to bed and I'm hyper. So I'm having a blast, and it's been a journey of a lifetime.
No, that's an amazing why. It's interesting because when I started this podcast again, right, it was about, hey, I want to learn about people and the people behind investing, not so much just, here's the dollars and cents and, cap rates and, all that good stuff. But it's interesting because when I started, I thought, hey, I'm going to ask, what does success mean, or what's the why? And most people are going to say, oh, because, I wanted to be able to quit my job or retire early or go travel. And, sure, those are nice things. And I think those are kind of byproducts, but I was shocked and surprised at how many people had very similar answers to that, right? Which is, hey, look, I love what I'm doing. I love helping other people. And it's that's my why now, right? Is just to continuously do this. And sure, the vacations aren't bad. I'm not, I take one every once in a while as well, but, other than what you're doing now, what's your other passions? Do you do anything outside of real estate? I have to ask because I know a lot of real estate investors are like, no, my passion is real estate. That's it. Do you have any hobbies or anything outside of that?
Yes, my other passion is self-development.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I read a lot of books. I'm usually about 2 books a week. I listen to a lot of podcasts. They're usually self-development. My other hobby is growth,
right,
and self-improvement. And that's where I spend my other time. I also I'm into health, so I work out and try to maintain good habits. And then I build businesses. So like we still have a construction company on the go, and we work with that continually to build and improve that business as well.
If I can ask you, what's one book and or one podcast, or give me a book and a podcast that you found kind of set your mindset or changed your mindset to a different place? And this is more for me, actually. I want to read the book that kind of had that aha moment for you, or really helped you in that.
So I find this question so hard to answer because of the volume of books I go through. And I honestly feel like all of them have added their, value in their own way. And I'm sure if I reread them, they're going to add it again.
Even more. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I can tell you the
5 books
I'm reading now. I find that's a better, because I don't have one defining book, but I can tell you the book that I'm reading now that I've read a few times. And when I read, I don't often read a book more than once. When I do, that just tells you how much of an impact it has had on me. So there's 2 books that I've read a few times. One of them is You Were Born Rich by Bob Proctor. And the other one is The Illusion of Money by Kyle Cease. So that's the 2 books that I've read a couple of times, and that created.
I'm just writing this down.
Yeah, of course, have created a big impact in my life. And
are you audio book, or do you read? Like actually read?
Well, I do both. So I do every morning. I have a morning routine that I come down and I read an actual book. And then the rest of the time, like whenever I can, I'm on Audible just to save time. Because like when I'm driving my kids to school, or when I'm like even brushing my teeth or whatever, that I can't be sitting down reading a book, I'm on Audible listening to something. So that's kind of in around what I do. In terms of podcasts, I've been a fan for the last couple of years of Tom Billio, and I think that's the top one podcast on my YouTube roster. Really, I put it on and I'm always there. I also listen to Louis House quite a bit as well. And that's the two. I used to listen to James Altucher a lot, especially his earlier stuff, but have since, continued to find new people. But that's my top two right now.
That's amazing. And I don't blame you. Someone asked me that the other day, and I'm usually asking people that question. Someone asked me that question the other day, and I paused for probably a good minute. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Tell me yours.
So mine, I do a lot of audiobooks. If I read, I fall asleep in a good way. So and I don't want to lie and say, oh, hey, I'm sitting here reading books all the time, because I'm definitely not. I audio and podcasts are my go-to. I honestly, I'm going to go with a very typical, and I don't know, it's not cheesy, but very typical. And I'm sure everybody says this, but I found, and I read it a long time ago, but honestly, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And see what I mean? It's just like very, very typical. But I don't know. When I read it, it was actually like one of the first investing books I ever read. And again, I'm not a reader. So the first time I read the book, I went basically through chapters 1 and 2 and put it down. And I picked it up about a year later and reread it. And and the only reason I'm saying I picked it up, I put it in my ears and re-listened to it. But it was interesting because the first time I read it, it kind of changed my mindset just in the first chapter where he's kind of telling the story about what's going on and all that. And I was like, very interesting, right? I never, I come from a real estate background, but interesting to hear it in that light or that mindset. But then when I went back and I had a bit more knowledge and I reread it, I was like, I get it now. Like now the book actually makes sense to me. And I just thought that was cool. Right. So when I get that question, that's what I go with. But I do read, I listen to podcasts a lot and a lot of real estate podcasts, obviously like Bigger Pockets. I'll plug Andrew Hines' podcast, right? Being my brother-in-law, kind of have to throw that one in there. I don't think I can say Bigger Pockets without saying Andrew Hines, but no, I like those as well because I get inspiration from some of the stories. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much the intricacy of how they did it, but more so the big picture of, oh, that's very interesting, right? Like I like that, this guy went to a small town and just ended up buying everything in that small town, and now he's totally retired, right? So that's what I find interesting about those podcasts. And then like yourself, a lot of self-improvement and kind of critical thinking podcasts as well. So
what are some of your top ones there?
I don't know. There's one I'm listening to right now. It's completely unrelated, but it's like History of Canada. Totally not self-help at all, but it was that's all that's coming to my head because I'm like, what did I listen to for the past 2 weeks? And it's been this extremely dry storytelling of Canada's history.
How do you like it?
It's in some ways it puts me to sleep. In other ways, it's actually really interesting because there's a history I was taught in school, which is very like high level. This happened on these dates, but it's like 135 episodes, and it's an episode a year since the first people came over to Canada. So it was. So
what's the most interesting fact or that comes to your mind right now that you heard there?
Okay, so a couple things. So let me give you some background to it. So I'm a bit of a history buff. Like I studied history in university. I went to university for archaeology, right? And I was like, I'm going to be Indiana Jake, and it didn't turn out all that way. And I realized there's very, very slim job market. You got to be in school for 6-7 years if you really want to do anything with that industry. And again, not being a big reader, I was kind of like, oops, I made a mistake here. So, so I came out of that and went into real estate. But still, so interesting facts are, at least what I found, is just in our own backyard, like driving around from here to Toronto and to Niagara, there's some seriously historically significant sites that people pass by every day. And it's not until you have the context of why those sites are there until you drive by and go, oh, this is like, wow, this is really interesting. Even in Hamilton, York Boulevard, there's so much history just right there, and why that was built to protect the bay and things like that. So completely off topic from real estate, but very good question. Happy to talk about that all day.
That's amazing.
But yeah, there's definitely some critical thinking, and then that ties in with, older properties in real estate, historical properties in real estate. I've always been a sucker for like a character home, like a Victorian character home. Still have yet to buy and renovate. But if you go through my YouTube list, there's a lot of like people renovating, 18th century homes, and it's a very interesting topic.
We've owned a few, a few of these older century home properties. So it's.
Tell me about that. Is it as nightmarish as they say on YouTube? Because
I'm like, I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think unless your purpose is to restore it for like just more sentimental reasons, because financially, the process of restoring something is just very expensive. And when you're looking at like a burr or a flip, the numbers all of a sudden don't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's not like you can get a much higher amount of rent for those properties either. So you kind of like unfortunately, and I've had this conversation. We just bought a property out in St. John, a sixplex that's from 1890s.
Okay.
And it's just a beautiful farmhouse, it's sitting on a hill on like 2.5 acres of land that we're looking to develop. So it's an ongoing discussion. Like, do we need to tear it down? Do we keep it? We're looking to build like some apartment buildings on this land.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely brings you back to like, it's beautiful, but it's not easy to work with homes like them. Yeah.
No, and I've been there a lot on MLS, right? You're searching through realtor.ca and you look at it, you go, oh, this is gorgeous, right? Look at those original floors. And then the investor kicks in and goes, oh my gosh, look at those original floors. Like, this is going to be a fortune.
Exactly. We tried. So that first home we bought, they had these beautiful like doors, ornate doors and trims. And we tried to restore, obviously chipped and all these things.
Yeah.
And we probably went through like 3 different processes to try to restore them. We were like already negative to the door and trim budget that we would have had originally. And we're like, and it doesn't look great because this is, it just takes so much work and money to bring it to where it needs to be. We ended up having to take it away. So, and
when you were buying these properties, were they just opportunity purchases to say, hey, like this is a great price, let's just buy it and see what happens? Or was it more of a, what was the reasoning behind buying something, like not the farmhouse that you're going to develop? Because that's obviously something a little bit different, but what was the reason to buy the historical home or the older home in that case?
So yeah, it had nothing to do with its age. In my case, it was location, zoning, size. Like that was why we purchased it. The house was very, very, very run down. Like it needed a full. It was a full gut job. Like we started everything from scratch. So
very interesting. Yeah, no, there's a lot of those in Hamilton, right? If you're talking about Hamilton investing, it's sometimes it's like, okay, well, that's the only thing to buy. So I guess let's see what we can do. And they do make great, fourplexes and triplexes. What's the best piece of advice? I'm going to give you one more of these questions that I'm sure you hate just as much as I do. But never mind books and podcasts, but out of your own experience, to a newer or moderate investor.
The first thing that popped into my head was self-awareness. I think it takes, I get a lot of questions from new investors. There's so many options out there in real estate. There's so many strategies. There's so many markets. They're just confused. Like, what do I do? Where do I get into? This sounds interesting. That sounds interesting.
Right.
And in a way, you're going to have to experiment to see what you like because you don't know what you don't know. So there's going to be a little bit of that. But there is quite a bit of work that you can do to streamline that process and filter what you're planning to get into. And that's through self-awareness of what are your goals, what's your end goal in mind, but also like, what do you like to do with your time? Because, I'll have people reach out and they say, hey, my goal is to retire in a year or two, but let me go and start an apartment building acquisition business, being the managing partner. I'm like, those two things don't align.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I work crazy hours, right? Like it's a lot of work. It's a business that you're running. You can't start a new business and then expect to retire in 2 years. So you kind of have to gain that kind of clarity for yourself early on to see who you are, what you want to do, where your goals are, so you can at least streamline and filter some of those options and then focus on the ones that seem to make most sense with your life and your lifestyle. The second piece of advice is go bigger sooner. Don't be scared to, go invest in an apartment building or go partake on something like this. I come in and partner with people that are doing it. And instead of buying a duplex that's cash flowing, $200 a month, come and own a 50-unit building with us and make double that in cash flow and own a much bigger pile of a very stable asset. So that's my two.
I think those are two extremely powerful statements, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. And just before we wrap up, do you have social medias you want to give out and people can see what you're up to and what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. So Facebook and Instagram, either or, it's my name, Adriana.Ostapenko. Feel free to reach out, send me a message. I'd love to connect.
And we'll have those linked in the, in the bio so people can just go right there. But thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.